Before we begin, I want to be very clear about the nature of this conversation. What I'm about to share is candid, it's direct, and it's meant for professionals who are willing to look honestly at what's happening inside our own industry. Some of this will be uncomfortable, and that's intentional. My name is Steve Colano, and today's topic is unusually timely. In just the last 24 to 48 hours, we've witnessed some of the most aggressive gatekeeping I've seen in my career. Not healthy disagreement, not principled debate, but coordinated attempts by industry leaders to misdirect, to distort, and in some cases, to outright fabricate narratives in order to degrade opposing voices. That's not a coincidence. It's a signal, because what you're seeing right now is an industry fighting back harder than it ever has before, precisely because it feels control slipping. This moment represents a turning point, and what I want to walk through today is not opinion or outrage, but a clear diagnostic framework for understanding why this behavior emerges and what it tells us about systemic decay. Welcome to Confidential Remarks. What we're looking at here is not random dysfunction. Industries don't fail in dramatic explosions. They fail through sequences. There are clear, observable indicators that appear long before collapse becomes obvious from the outside. When foundational agreements erode, everything built on top of them becomes unstable. Decision-making degrades. Accountability weakens, and behavior that would once have been corrected becomes normalized. The cycle you see on this slide isn't theoretical. It's a pattern that repeats across high-stakes industries whenever incentives drift away from truth and toward preservation of power. The first and most critical warning sign is the breakdown of fundamental agreement. This happens when professionals within an industry can no longer agree on basic definitions or first principles. When people start using the same words to mean entirely different things, coordination becomes impossible. You can't solve problems if you can't even agree on what the problem is. At that point, disagreements aren't about solutions anymore. They're about reality itself. And once that happens, confusion becomes a feature, not a bug. When shared definitions disappear, the operational consequence is service failure. In a functioning industry, common language enables consistency, reliability, and trust. But in a decayed system, the lack of shared foundations makes consistent service mathematically impossible. What replaces it is fragmentation. One standard becomes 10 interpretations. And the public, whether they can articulate it or not, feels that instability immediately. An industry without definitions cannot serve, no matter how confident it sounds while failing. The second sign is more dangerous because it feels subtle at first. It's the collapse of the distinction between verifiable fact and personal opinion. When facts are treated as feelings and feelings are defended as facts, the system loses its ability to self-correct. The line between what happened and how someone feels about what happened disappears. And when that line erodes, truth becomes negotiable and accountability becomes optional. Healthy debate is not loud agreement. It's structured disagreement grounded in evidence. But when fact and opinion blur, debate stops being productive and starts becoming performative. At that point, decisions are no longer driven by data, but by volume, influence, or emotional leverage. The industry doesn't correct itself anymore. It retreats into denial. And denial always feels safer than change until the consequences arrive. The third sign is tribalism. This is where information is no longer evaluated on its merit, but on who said it. The critical question quietly shifts from "is this true?" to "is this coming from one of us?" Once that happens, accuracy loses priority to allegiance. And this shift is the primary mechanism by which harmful behavior becomes protected rather than challenged. When tribal loyalty becomes the filter, accountability disappears. Challenging a flawed claim starts being framed as betrayal rather than responsibility. Critical thinking is recast as disloyalty. Fact-checking becomes hostility. And the system begins rewarding silence over integrity. At that point, loyalty checks replace fact checks, and the damage compounds quietly. The outcome of tribalism and collapsed standards is predictable. Harmful behavior becomes protected. Bad actors are shielded not because they're right, but because they're useful. Misinformation persists, not because it's accurate, but because correcting it would threaten the tribe. And once protection replaces correction, decay accelerates. In this environment, meaningful correction becomes impossible. The industry's immune system fails. When internal rot goes unaddressed, it eventually manifests externally as irrelevance and loss of trust. And trust, once eroded, does not return on command. It has to be earned back through structural change, not messaging. This is the moment for reflection, not accusation, diagnosis. Do we have shared definitions? Do we distinguish data from opinion? Do we evaluate truth independently of status? And when harm occurs, do we correct it or do we protect it? These questions are uncomfortable precisely because they're effective. Decay is not accidental, it's structural, and that means it can be reversed, but only intentionally. The path forward is not louder messaging or stronger branding. It's a return to first principles. Re-establish shared definitions. Separate fact from emotion, and prioritize truth over tribal loyalty. If we raise the signal and lower the noise, correction becomes possible again. And so does trust. This has been Confidential Remarks.